Hey there, this is Perch, and wanted to talk. This is kind of a hairy topic, and I think there's a lot of sides to it, and it comes down to what you feel comfortable in your gut and what you believe for your career and kind of what you owe companies. So this is one of those topics that I think does not have a single answer, and ultimately comes down to kind of personal choice, personal ethics, if you will. And that's so there's this long running topic, and this is not new, although it's starting to bubble up now more as people are kind of eyes are opening as they're seeing these billion-dollar films, and at the same time the illusion, I guess, that comic book creators are making tons of money is the curtain is lifting on that. In the 90s, in the late 80s and 90s, this was definitely out there. There were lots of topics being written. It was a big point of kind of the image revolution, the initial exodus of a lot of the top creators from Marvel who wanted a better gig for themselves and wanted to have more ownership and more control, and didn't want to be treated like kind of disposable freelancers. I'm trying not to use certain words here because I want to present a kind of fair view of it, but that was the term of the early 90s, was disposable freelancer. And it really kind of comes down to this concept that creators come in and they do work for hire gigs. There's no kind of long term commitment on the part of the publisher. There's no stock options. There's no bonus. Maybe there's a royalty. In many cases, there is not. And there's no job security. If you get sick, tough. If you, in some cases, you need insurance, you buy your own insurance. If you irritate the wrong editor, then you have no job. You have no inlet into that publisher, and then you have to pay both in time and oftentimes money. You have to go kind of vouch and rep and fight your way back in. You wind up spending a lot of money to self network, and this is for an industry where networking and that kind of uh, personal business management, let's say, is not something that's taught well at school. If you went to school and you got an art degree, or depending on what field you're in, personal repping, personal management is not taught well, and you kind of learn what you can from little YouTube free help advice. I mean, today on how to manage yourself in LinkedIn and how to do little things, but that advice isn't particularly great. It's not. It's very generic. It's very much a one size fits all, and in some cases, like a lot of things on the internet, it's not accurate. Maybe you've seen or heard the phrase, if you're sick, you don't go up on the internet trying to diagnose your symptoms, because you're going to get a lot of false positives. You're going to get a lot of kind of random advice, and you're probably going to scare the hell out of yourself, because you go in there with an earache, and suddenly you just the internet will tell you have terminal cancer. So it's not really what you want to do. But the point is, creators don't have a lot of options for how to secure a long-term job. It's not like, and granted, no job is secure unless it's one you're doing yourself, which I guess is the point of where we're going with all this. But still, if you go get a job at you know Microsoft, you're going to get a severance if they decide to lay you off. You're going to get health insurance. You're going to get kind of yearly reviews that will lead to things like raises and bonuses and stock options and incentives and other things. If you go get a job at a hospital, if you go get a job at an education facility, you can go for tenure. There's a lot of options for you, where basically you're not living kind of week to week. But it's also true that our culture, our society in general, I'm talking about US culture here, is increasingly moving to a freelancer consultant contract type model. And it's understandable why. It gives a lot of flexibility to the company to, if times are tough, then they can easily cut without a lot of additional spend or long term commitment. And if the market changes, if you irritate somebody inside the company, there's very little you have to do to build a case to actually, terminate somebody or give them a chance to get better. If they're a freelancer, you just kind of cut ties and you move on. It puts a lot of control on the part of the business. And some claim, this is this is only fair to the business one generating the wealth. But that's not really. I mean, that's half the story. But businesses are successful typically because of hard work from their employees. The employees are relevant. The employees are generating a lot of that wealth, a lot of that stability. And so the idea of creating a platform of safety and security is fair. That's not socialism. That's not telling any company what to do. That's just kind of very basic. If you care for your workers will care for you. Kind of that handshake. And in past times, and again, some might disagree with this based on labor laws and other things. It's funny. The more that there's an examination of corporations and how cruel they treat employees and kind of labor laws and other things, the worse it seems to get for employees. We pass all these laws, we pass all these things, these initiatives, and then you find out that the contractor freelance uh, usage has grown significantly from even where it was back 20, 30 years ago, where there was, at least some honor in the agreement between companies and workers. Um, anyway, that's again a topic for another time, perhaps. But where comics are concerned, it seems like a screwy deal where you have creators come in and create kind of legendary stories that get reprinted, reused, and translated into movies and generate kind of the wealth and the IP of these characters. But unlike an author of a book or a J.K. Rowling type character or Stephen King, they get no benefit from what they create. Well, I'm going to put an asterisk on that. They get some benefit, but they don't get the kind of benefit that other creative mediums get, where you either draw something or you write something, and you have some long-lasting ownership of it because it's yours. Well, if you're being paid to write Spider-Man, Spider-Man's not yours, and you get the benefit of this, pre-existing character with a built-in kind of sales model and a lot of pieces. It's very difficult for a creator to come in and say, I wrote this amazing arc of Spider-Man featuring Doc Ock, and so I should get some benefit to it. It's like, yeah, well, but what about the creator who created Spider-Man, and what about the creator who created Doc Ock? And I mean, it's not that simple as just saying I wrote a nice story with these characters that weren't mine, but it was a nice story, so I should benefit. Yeah, you should benefit, but everybody in that chain should benefit. And eventually, with these comics running, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, there get to be so many people in that chain that there's it's very hard to effectively create benefits for people, unless you take a very simplistic form of saying, hey, if you're working for us, we're going to give you some job security and stability. We're going to give you insurance. We're going to give you some royalties on the issues you write, and enough said. I think that there's an argument to be had there. But the battle that I alluded to at the beginning, that's been going on for a long time, is basically a battle that says, if you're doing work for hire, in other words, if you're working for Marvel or DC or one of the big publishers, should you put your best effort forward? If you're a creator, should you try to create big, amazing stories, or should you save your best ideas for your own stuff? If there's a door open for you at one point to do a creator-owned piece of work, then why should you spend your best story ideas, your best plots, these best concepts on characters you don't own, on a publisher that is basically got you at arm's reach, arm's distance, so to speak. Um, and and why would why do it? And I think it's a really tough question, because on one hand, I could say, a creator that's coming in that's hired to do a job, that's hired to write these kind of epic characters that we know we love, that there's a lot of history toward, they should put their best foot forward. They should do the best they can with that job. And it is self-serving, because if they create an amazing story arc, their name is printed on the cover, and they will get credit for it in the sense that, they become a bigger name. It gives them more options. If Tom King coming in to do the Vision, and he was given a lot of creative control to do what he did with Vision, and it won some awards, and it got him a lot of buzz around him of being a thoughtful kind of different writer who can bring a different story to the table. It helped get him his job at DC. No, there's no question about it. It helped get him in that job, and and as well as his network. I mean, the guy interned under Chris Claremont and other things, but um, it's it's hard to say that creators should just treat these jobs as disposable, even though they're work for hire, because in doing so, if you treat the job as disposable and you don't put your best foot forward, well, you're not going to build up a personal name for yourself. So that's one strike against you, and you keep yourself as very disposable. It's hard to get job security anywhere in a world where there's very little job security if you're phoning it in. Now, on the other end of the equation, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it does seem profoundly unfair that if you have kind of the idea of a lifetime, and I'm one of those people who believes that we aren't gifted with infinite ideas. We have a limited set of ideas. And I remember reading an article from Stephen King where he said there's no limit to your ideas. I've got great story ideas, and I can maybe I'll write 10 books, maybe I'll write 1,000 books, but I can there's no limit to good ideas. That sounds good, except Stephen King's books have become pretty derivative over time. And I do think there's true, based on just life experience and what you see and what you do in your life, it gives you ideas for stories. And there's only so much time in the day, and there's only so many ways you can create those ideas. Now, hopefully you're somebody with, 1,000 ideas and not two, but put it this way, there's I think there is a finite number of concepts and stories in your heart, in your soul. And so to spend them on a company that's going to pay you a flat rate, just maybe the same rate as the guy down the hall who's writing, a story about Spider-Man swinging around and he stops a burglar, and the burglar is down on his luck, and Spider-Man decides to take mercy on him and sends the burglar on his way, and Spider-Man wonders if he's done the right thing. I, blah blah blah. There's a by the numbers. There's a lot of by the numbers comics out there, and have been for a long time, but especially now. There's a lot of comics that just you read them and it's like popcorn. It's gone within a minute of closing the comic, and you say things like that. And by the way, if you ever say something like that to a creator, they will get thoroughly ticked at you. That how dare you? This is something they poured their heart and their soul out into, and in some cases, that's true. Sometimes you do pour your heart and soul into something, and it's just not good. It doesn't land well. It doesn't inspire anyone. It's not memorable. But it's also, I mean, it is a fact, and it's one that you can't have it both ways. There are plenty of creators who, at cons or in articles or on social media, will openly state kind of the disdain for work for hire, and will say, "I don't bring my best ideas for work for hire gigs." And if you're saying that out loud, you, the creator, are saying that out loud, you can't really knock somebody who says, "Yeah, this comic is forgettable." You've admitted you've made it forgettable. You've admitted you're just kind of coming in and fulfilling the terms of a contract. And so where do you stand? So where do you stand on that? I mean, for me, I think that it's a balance. I think that you should. I do believe in the you should go into your job with your heart, and that has caused me heartbreak a million times over. You should go into your job and you should try and do it the best you can. And if the job itself is poor, or you're not respected, or you're not treated well, or you're treated as disposable, then you should still try and do your best, but you should also try and get a new job. I think at some point you should be eyes wide open about your situation, and you should really take assessment of what is this job doing for you. For a lot of creators, I think they forget about the fact that they are building up a name for themselves. If you're lucky enough to be put on, a Batman, a Spider-Man, an X-Men, a Superman, one of these titles, you're getting a lot of exposure for your personal brand, you, and that's not insignificant, and that is something that the publisher is giving you. Now, what you do with that brand is up to you. If 20 years later you're still doing work for hire, you haven't really improved your situation, but you got a bunch of promotion for yourself, well then, maybe you're happy. You're just happy with that life, and it works for you. That's cool. But if you grumble And there are plenty of creators who grumble continuously about how how dare the publisher ask me for my best ideas? This is a work for hire agreement. And 20 years later, they're still doing work for hire agreements, even though they've had you know their name out there. Well, at some point, you have to say, I didn't take the self initiative to go creator own, to take I have these great ideas. I didn't take these great ideas and shop them. That's kind of on you. But I think you should enter into a job and try and do the best you can. I think that if you have like the one great, amazing, epic idea in your soul, I think holding on to that is fair. I think blowing that on a throwaway crossover story with the new Teen Titans is just, I don't know. I wouldn't do it. But I think you still should come in and try and build your brand, and then you should be always on the lookout for how your brand can transition or transform into something you have more control over, namely creator owned work, your own work. I think if you look at what Scott Snyder has done, I think he's definitely built up a pretty major brand, and I think you see him doing some creator owned stuff. I think what Rick Remender did, coming off of a run on X Force that was considered, I think, one of the best X-Men X runs of all time. Moving on to doing some other big work, and then he took the plunge and he said, "I'm going to do this for myself," and it's worked out for him. Mark Miller is another one who took that plunge. I think there's a lot. It's brave when you can do that. I think it's definitely scary. Let no one tell you. I mean, there's a lot of people who do it and are successful, and then go give speeches about it. Just do it. Just jump out on your own, man. Just do it. It's fine. Don't be afraid. Yeah, it's terrifying to go off on your own, to run a business that you are responsible for, to know that the person who's putting food in your mouth and money in your pocket is you and you alone. I think at the same time, I think the comic industry really owes it to the creators to fix this problem. The idea of freelancer consultant, uh, that whole world is way too fragile, and it's unfair to people who are making really strong creative work, and especially when that work is being spun into billion-dollar IP franchises. I think you've got a problem, and I think if you want your IP to remain valuable, it's time to actually come up with a better model for the creative community. It's time to start investing in your editors and your marketing team and your company as a whole. You're running a lot of this completely on the fumes of properties that were built up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and a little bit the 90s, and you're this isn't sustainable. Would you like to keep making? Would you like to keep having 1.2 billion dollar opening films? Then you've got to start putting some better trust into the workers, and I think it's time for the companies to do their part to reach out and help and show the same commitment that you want your creative team to work for. I don't know. It's a complicated topic, but that's me talking around all ends of it. What do you think? What's your take on this? Where's the balance sit? Are you do you believe kind of extreme on one side or the other, or do you think there is a balance here, and what is it? Hey, thanks for listening. Appreciate that. And if you would be so inclined to subscribe, hit the bell for notification, like the video, follow me on social media, Comic Perch on Twitter, tell some friends, and would love to have you and love to hear your ideas for future topics. Thanks.